Welcome back to Overnight Accountants course of Form 1120H. And as I said, this is a basic course. We're now in part 2. We went through the intro, and now we're going to actually start preparing your 1120H form. So what you may want to do is print out the form. You should be able to download it from our website and have that handy as you go through this section. We're going over completing Form 1120H, and this is part 1. There's going to be several parts to this, this section of the course. What we're going to go over right now, there's 6 sections to Form 1120H. First section is going to be the organizational information, and as you can see, that's the top portion of the 1120H. And as you see here, we're using a 2016 return. If you're watching this in a later year, really don't worry. I don't believe the 1120H form has changed in many years. So it should still be good. Section 1. Section 2 is going to be exempt financial information, as you can see here where the arrow is. Non-exempt income, which is Section 3. Section 4 is deductions from non-exempt income. Section 5 is going to be your tax calculation. And then finally, Section 6 is your signature and prepare section. So as you can see there at the bottom. Now what we're going to discuss in this section is organizational information. Believe it or not, this can be a little more complex than you may think for your 1120H. We're going to go over some of the problems we run into, or some of the challenges that many 1120Hs face as they go through and try to properly file their tax return. Section here is going to be your name, as you can see. If you're looking at your 1120H at home or in your office, you see your name here. Now what we want to put there is a legal name of your association. This is the name that you use to get your EIN number, which is another word for employer identification number, and you use an SS4 form to get that. You should get a letter from the IRS once you apply for it, stating what your name is and when they give you the EIN number. Now, the number is an employer identification number, which kind of be a misnomer. It's the same thing as a taxpayer identification number, such as when you're doing your personal return, that would be your Social Security number. This is kind of like the Social Security number for your 1120H, and it should have a distinct number if it is an organization. Now, this is what you file with the Secretary of State. Another way to get your legal name is what you file with the Secretary of State in your organizational filings. Or if you don't have that, you may just want to use an old tax return if you have it, or even your banking records or your bank account records should very closely resemble your legal name of the association. Next section is going to be your address. Now, what the IRS would prefer is a physical address unless mail is not delivered to that address. However, we recommend, this is kind of not really spelled out in the instructions, but many HOAs use a P.O. box simply because it's very convenient, because as your organizational leaders change, as your board of directors change, of course, their home address is going to change. So having a P.O. box for your HOA, if you have one, don't worry, use that address in this because it provides some consistency. And oftentimes if you change directors, you may end up having official correspondence going to the wrong address and you may never even know about it. So many HOAs use a P.O. box. Again, as I said, because officers change, a P.O. box is just practical for many. Employer identification number. This is the challenge that many HOAs run into. HOAs must have their own employer identification number because they are a separate entity. So this is also called a taxpayer identification number. And in many instances for HOAs, they won't know their EIN. So if you don't know your EIN, you want to check your records. Again, you want to look for that SS4 form, and there also would be an EIN assignment letter from the IRS providing you with that number, telling you about what forms you would need to file. If you don't know, maybe your state licensing agency, generally for most it's going to be your Secretary of State's office. They may have a copy of your EIN. Also, if you can't find it, contact your bank, because oftentimes, at least in more modern times, that EIN is required by many banks to even open up a checking account. So you may want to check with them if you don't know it. Finally, you can try to contact the IRS specialty tax line if you don't know your EIN. Here's the number, as you can see on the screen. You can see the hours are open. However, this is a challenge for many also, because as your board of directors change, your founding members change, you must be the person authorized to receive the EIN. So you run up in a catch-22 with this for your EIN. And again, this could be a challenge for many HOAs. If you are sure you don't have an EIN, meaning you want to be absolutely sure, be sure you don't have one, because you don't want to apply for a second one if you already have one. However, if you know you've never applied for an EIN, you complete Form SS4 application for an EIN, which is relatively simple to complete, or you can apply online at irs.gov. Next section here is going to be your date the association was formed, as you can see here. Now what you want to put in here is the date you became a legal entity, and that would be like the date you filed your organizational papers with the state entity, oftentimes Secretary of State. You can also check your old return or with the state to see what date you used on your old return, or you may want to check with the state to see if they know. If you're not a legal entity, or you don't know if you're a legal entity or not, you may want to see an attorney to see what you need to do in those circumstances. Because many HOAs, we get calls all the time from folks that have HOAs, and they really don't know how they are filed with the Secretary of State. Now, oftentimes, though, you can search. In many states, you can now search online with the Secretary of State and see if your entity is actually registered and see if you are in compliance with filing all your annual filings that you need to file for your organization. A little beyond this course, but you may want to check that out at the website and see. Okay, check boxes. As you can see here beneath the organizational information, then you have your check boxes here. As you see final return, and this basically means your HOA has ceased to exist. If you check that box, this will be its final return. As you can see that box there. Name change, and then you want to check that box if the legal name of your entity or HOA has changed since the last tax return you filed. Address change. If you change your address since your last filed return, again, this is why a PO box would come in handy, so you don't need to be changing this every year as your officers change. And then finally, if you're amending return. So basically, if you're correcting an error on a previously filed 1128, you want to check that box there for an amended return. And that's it for this section of the 1120H course. Next section, we'll continue to fill out your Form 1120H.